I still dream about the crash sometimes. The way metal screams when it rips open like wet paper. The sound of shattering glass echoing across sterile tile floors. And then silence, unnatural heavy silence, broken only by the faint rattle of a final breath in Emily's throat as I held her hand under the broken shelves of Harlan's pharmacy. It was snowing that night, light flurries drifting over Road 89 just north of Livingston, Montana. Not enough to slow traffic, but enough to give the headlights a haloed glow. I remember I was organizing the blood pressure meds alphabetically, something mundane to help pass the night shift. Emily, my tech, was in the back laughing at a video on her phone. It was supposed to be a quiet Thursday. Then came the headlights. Too fast, too bright, too close. The semi-truck blew through the parking lot, never slowing. The driver tweaked out on God knows what had been awake for 36 hours straight. He was supposed to be hauling grain to Idaho. Instead, he crossed 3 lanes of traffic and plowed through the front window of the pharmacy like it was made of paper. I remember flying backward, hitting something, the cold bite of air where a wall used to be. The silence afterward, the kind of silence that only comes after something terrible. Emily's body was limp, one leg twisted unnaturally beneath her. Bottles of oxycodone and ibuprofen rolled across the floor, mixing with the spreading pool of blood. I had a fractured collarbone, 4 cracked ribs, and a pulse. Emily didn't. The lawsuit paid out after 6 months. The trucking company settled fast, probably worried about optics. I got enough to relocate, enough to start over somewhere new, maybe somewhere warmer, somewhere where the sound of brakes didn't send a cold shiver down my spine. But I didn't go south, didn't go anywhere sunny. Instead, I found myself in Stone Tree, Montana, a nowhere town tucked between the Gallatin and Absaroka mountain ranges, where the wind cuts sideways through the streets and the winters last longer than they should. Population 187, though. I swear that number includes livestock. They say people like me, survivors, the broken ones, get drawn to empty places. I didn't believe that until I saw the Help Wanted sign in the dusty window of Tucker's Pharmacy on Main Street. No hiring committee, no HR paperwork, just a wooden sign and a door that creaked like it hadn't been oiled since the Reagan administration. The pharmacy was housed in an old brick building that used to be a hardware store. High ceilings with exposed beams, floors that creaked when you walked, charming in the daylight. Eerie as hell, after 10 p.m., there were dusty display shelves lined with half-forgotten cold remedies, a register older than me, and a basement that smelled like mildew and embalming fluid. The locals claimed it was the only pharmacy for 40 miles in any direction. A blessing, and apparently a curse. Franklin Tucker met me at the counter. Gray beard, flannel shirt, hands like old rope. He didn't ask about the accident or the year-long gap in my resume. Didn't flinch when I admitted I had trouble sleeping, sometimes froze up when I heard the squeal of brakes. Instead, he nodded once, then handed me a single piece of paper. Typed, yellowed, creased like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times. Across the top in bold block letters, it read, "Night shift rules, do not ignore." I blinked. Rules? He tapped the paper. More like survival guidelines. I laughed lightly, nervously. Security stuff. Franklin didn't smile. You'll see. 7 rules, no explanations, just rules. Rule 1, never address customers by name unless they say it first. Rule 2, if the prescription label printer runs without being prompted, destroy whatever comes out without reading it. Rule 3, the telephone will ring at 2:13 a.m. every night. Answer before the 3rd ring, but say nothing until the caller speaks. Rule 4, if a customer's reflection in the security mirror doesn't match their appearance, complete the transaction, but do not look them in the eye. Rule 5, the basement storage area is off limits between midnight and 4 a.m. Rule 6, if you hear knocking at the drive-through window when no car is visible, do not approach or turn your back to it. Rule 7, never under any circumstances accept prescriptions written by Dr. Leonard Cross. I gave Franklin a look, some kind of local hazing thing. He didn't answer, just handed me the store key and said, "First shift starts tonight, 9:45 p.m. sharp." It's weird how fast routine settles in. The first night was boring. Stocked shelves, watched some Netflix, took inventory of cough syrups and laxatives. No creepy customers, no haunted basements, no ghost calls. The second night was much the same. By the 3rd night, I barely remembered the rules. The paper was folded into my wallet, somewhere between my health insurance card and my old CPR cert. I'd started thinking maybe it was a joke after all, some long-running tradition in small towns where superstition stood in for workplace policy. I mean, the place was old. The kind of building where wind makes weird noises and every wall seems to hold a memory. But ghosts, dead doctors, haunted printers. It all sounded like something out of a Reddit creepypasta. Then came night 4. Snow was falling hard that evening. The power flickered around 10:30 p.m. The building groaned like it was tired of standing. I adjusted the thermostat, but it didn't seem to matter. The back half of the pharmacy was freezing, especially near the basement stairs. The kind of cold that sticks to your spine and makes your breath come out in fog even when you're inside. I was halfway through checking our stock of insulin. Mrs. Landry's order had come in late when the bell over the door chimed. I looked up. Standing just inside the entrance was Agnes Rowley, or someone who looked a hell of a lot like her. Agnes was 87, arthritic, and usually came in during the morning hours for her tramadol. Always wore a thick wool coat even in summer. But there she was standing stock still near the front counter. Snow dusted her coat, but nothing melted. Her breath didn't fog. I smiled instinctively. Evening, Mrs. Rowley. Trouble sleeping. That's when I remembered. Rule 1. Her eyes flicked toward me, cloudy like cracked glass. She didn't blink, didn't move. Not even a shuffle. I typed in her prescription manually, fingers shaking slightly. When I returned to the counter, she hadn't budged. Not a single inch. Her hand rose slowly, unnaturally, and laid a crisp $20 bill in exact change on the counter. Her fingertips were blue. Her nails, almost black. She turned and walked out, movements suddenly fluid like melting wax. At the door, she paused and spoke without turning. Careful with names, Michael Graves. Names have power here. Then she left. The door shut behind her with a hollow click. And I stood there, heart pounding, breath fogging in the cold air. My eyes glued to the pharmacy window that no longer showed any footprints in the snow. The snow hadn't stopped. By the time I left the pharmacy the morning after Agnes Rowley's visit, a thick white blanket had swallowed Stone Tree whole. My Subaru looked like it had been submerged in powdered sugar, and the wind was still howling down from the mountains like it was angry at the earth itself. I drove home with my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Agnes's words played on repeat in my head. Names have power here. I didn't sleep. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Not the one in her file photo, smiling eyes, soft and wrinkled, but the one from last night. Frozen. Empty. By the time 9:30 p.m. rolled around, I was back at Tucker's pharmacy with a strong cup of gas station coffee in hand and a stomach that felt like it was lined with gravel. I unlocked the front door, flipped the open sign to closed, and checked the deadbolt twice. Something about last night had changed the atmosphere in the building. It didn't feel like a place of medicine anymore. It felt like a place that was waiting for something to happen. I walked behind the counter and dug out the wrinkled paper Franklin had given me the rules. I unfolded it carefully, smoothing it across the counter like scripture. The typewriter font looked older in the fluorescent light. Maybe the paper hadn't changed. Maybe I had. Rule 1, never address customers by name unless they say it first. I underlined it with a red pen. A little late for that now. Rule 2, if the prescription label printer runs without being prompted, destroy whatever comes out without reading it. Rule 3, the telephone will ring at 2:13 a.m. every night. Answer before the third ring, but say nothing until the caller speaks. Rule 4, if a customer's reflection in the security mirror doesn't match their appearance, complete the transaction, but do not look them in the eye. Rule 5, the basement storage area is off limits between midnight and 4 a.m. Rule 6, if you hear knocking at the drive-through window when no car is visible, do not approach or turn your back to it. Rule 7, never under any circumstances accept prescriptions written by Dr. Leonard Cross. I stared at the seventh one for a long moment. It was the only one that included a name. That felt intentional. The rest of the night was eerily quiet. No customers, no deliveries, just me, the hum of the fluorescence, and the persistent wind hammering the back wall like a fist. Then at 11:32 p.m., the front door chimed again. This time I didn't greet the customer by name. She was middle-aged, hair pulled back into a tight bun, glasses fogged from the cold. She said nothing when she approached the counter, just slid a prescription slip across the counter. I hesitated, my fingers hovered over the paper. Evening, I said softly, how can I help you? She looked me dead in the eye. Her pupils were wide, too wide. Her mouth didn't move, but her voice came anyway. Fill the prescription. I glanced down at the slip. The name was Tracy K., and the medication requested was non-existent. At least not one approved by any pharmacy board I'd ever studied under. Compound X17, 2 vials, no substitutions, no dosage, no instructions. Just a name and a stamp where the doctor's signature should be. The name Dr. Leonard Cross. Rule 7 burned in the back of my mind. Never under any circumstances accept prescriptions written by Dr. Leonard Cross. I cleared my throat. I'm sorry, ma'am. This prescription, she tilted her head and something cracked in her neck as she did. You've already seen too much Michael Graves. She hadn't told me her name. I hadn't told her mine. I stepped back, hand brushing under the counter toward the emergency alert button, standard in most independent pharmacies. Before I could press it, the lights flickered. The mirror above the vitamin section flashed, and her reflection didn't move, not exactly. While she stood at the counter, her reflection faced away. The mirrored version of her was staring at the ceiling, mouth hanging open as if in silent scream. Rule 4, complete the transaction. Do not look them in the eye. I grabbed a paper bag and fumbled for 2 empty vials, shoving them inside and stapling it shut. Here you go. That'll be $40. She laid 4 crisp $10 bills on the counter. The bills were fresh, freshly minted, serial numbers in perfect sequence. She didn't blink as she took the bag. As she walked to the door, I watched her reflection in the mirror. It turned back and looked at me. Only the reflection. Her real body didn't move. See you soon, it mouthed. The door chimed as she left. I stumbled backward into the shelves, heart racing. My throat was dry. My palms were damp. I sat down on the stool behind the counter and let my head fall into my hands. The rules weren't quirky old-town folklore. They were instructions, rituals, protections. At 12:14 a.m., the printer started. I hadn't touched the keyboard, hadn't processed a single order. But the printer buzzed and hummed, and a label began to feed out of the machine, slowly, methodically. My instinct was to read it, but Rule 2 pulsed in my mind. If the prescription label printer runs without being prompted, destroy whatever comes out without reading it. I snatched it before it finished printing, crumpled it in my fist, and shoved it into the trash bin under the sink. The paper was hot, hot like it had been pressed to skin. The phone rang. I didn't even glance at the clock. 1 ring. 2 rings. I snatched the receiver off the cradle just before the 3rd. Silence, then static. Then a voice distant, like it was being spoken across a long hallway underwater. Michael, do not go to the basement. My voice caught in my throat. I didn't say anything. Remembered Rule 3. He's close tonight. You open the door with your name. He smelled it. Who are you? I whispered before I could stop myself. Silence. Then Clara Tucker. Tell Franklin I said hello. And remember the 7th rule. It's the only one he can't break. Click. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the receiver still in my hand, the paper in the trash can still smoldering faintly, and my own name echoing through the silence. Outside, the snow still fell. Inside, the rules were now more than words. They were binding. At exactly 11:59 p.m., the basement door thumped. It was subtle, like something heavy shifting below, but in a building this old, every sound traveled like it was made just a few feet away. I froze mid-step, an open bottle of ibuprofen in one hand, inventory clipboard in the other. The sound came again, a low, dragging scrape. I didn't move. The door sat at the far end of the hall behind the prescription counter, a thick, dark-stained slab of wood with an old brass knob and no deadbolt. I hadn't touched it since my first night on the job. I hadn't wanted to. It was the kind of door that made your instincts whisper, leave it alone. And then came the 3rd sound. A knock. Not loud, not rushed, just deliberate. 3 slow taps spaced evenly apart. Knock, knock, knock. I backed away. The clock on the register clicked, over to 12:00 a.m. Midnight, and I remembered Rule 5, the basement storage area is off limits between midnight and 4:00 a.m. The thumping stopped. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I let it out all at once. My pulse pounded in my ears. I grabbed the clipboard and tried to focus on inventory again, but my eyes kept drifting back to that door like it had gravity. I didn't sleep the day before, and now my body was starting to crash. I'd only had half a turkey sandwich since noon. My nerves were shot, my judgment cloudy. But even in that fog, I knew not to open the door. At 12:31 a.m., the power flickered. The overhead fluorescence dimmed for just a second, long enough to send a jolt of adrenaline down my spine, then buzz back to life. I reached for my phone to check the time. 12:32 a.m. A notification flashed, no signal. I stared at the screen. I'd had 3 bars all night, the kind of reception you'd kill for in a mountain town. Then came the next sound, the prescription printer. It whirred awake behind me. I hadn't touched the keyboard, hadn't input anything. I turned slowly, every hair on my arm standing up. The machine chugged softly, printing a single label. I knew what I had to do. Rule 2, destroy whatever comes out. But my legs wouldn't move. My curiosity held me like a chain. The label fed out face down. I could just grab it and shred it without looking. But what if it had information? What if it was a warning? My hand hovered above it. The paper was warm. A faint curl of steam rose from it like breath. And then as I watched, the name Leonard Cross appeared printed backward, as if reflected in a mirror. I grabbed the label and slammed it into the shredder without flipping it. The shredder made a low grinding sound that vibrated through the floor. I turned the machine off quickly, not wanting to draw attention. 12:47 a.m., the drive-through window knocked. I didn't approach. Rule 6, if you hear knocking at the drive-through window when no car is visible, Do not approach or turn your back to it. Instead, I stayed behind the shelving body angled just enough to keep it in my peripheral vision. Knock, knock, knock. This time I saw a hand, pressed flat against the glass, pale, wrinkled, fingertips blue with cold or rot. I couldn't tell. The hand tapped once more. Then a voice crackled through the intercom. Michael Graves, we have something for you. It was a woman's voice wavering between something elderly and something else. Your friend Emily misses you, Michael. She remembers the way you held her hand. She remembers the blood. I staggered backward, bumping into the shelving behind me. My heart raced, my throat clenched. No one in this town knew about Emily. I hadn't told Franklin. I hadn't told anyone. The intercom hissed. She's waiting for you. Leonard Cross wrote her a prescription, specially compounded, just for the pain. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath again. Behind me, the basement door creaked. I turned to look. It had opened an inch, then another. Cold air spilled into the pharmacy, carrying with it the faint scent of antiseptic and something underneath. Copper, like blood left out too long. I was being squeezed from both sides. Drive-through in front, basement behind. You're not supposed to survive both, I realized. I ducked low and crawled behind the counter, grabbing the only thing that felt like a weapon, the Narcan injection kit we kept for overdoses. It wasn't much, but the plastic syringe felt solid in my hand. Then came the faceless figure. It floated up from the basement, not climbing stairs, but rising like helium, smooth and unnatural. It wore a white lab coat stained brown in places that might once have been red. Its limbs moved like a marionette. Its head hung at a sharp angle like a broken neck that hadn't quite healed. And in its hand was a prescription bag, white, unmarked. It glided to the drive-thru and placed the bag into the transfer drawer. The hand outside accepted it, then passed back a second bag. This one, pulsing. The faceless figure bowed, then turned. I ducked deeper behind the shelves. Its footsteps changed, jerky, now heel-first, unnatural weight. Then it spoke. Not loudly, but close. Mr. Graves, we know you're here. Your car is outside. Its voice was pleasant, professional, almost cheerful. Dr. Cross is very interested in your biochemistry, your survival, your resurrection. The steps moved closer, my chest tightened. He believes your blood holds potential. Bridging the veil and returning intact is rare. You're special, Michael. You're the compound he's been waiting for. I gripped the Narcan tighter. My palms were slick with sweat. Then the phone rang. One ring, two rings. I vaulted over the counter and grabbed the receiver midair. Just before the third ring, I held the phone to my ear, breath hitching, trying to stay silent. Static. Then a woman's voice, they're coming tonight. All 7. Cross's failures. Each worse than the last. I recognized her. The voice from the other night. Clara Tucker. I'll hold the line as long as I can, but you have to remember, the rules aren't just for survival. They're a lock. Every rule, every one you follow is a seal. What happens if I break one? You let something in. The line went dead. And the faceless pharmacist gone. The basement door shut again, no sign of movement. I stood in the middle of the pharmacy, panting, surrounded by silence and flickering light. The clock now read 2:15 a.m. The worst of the night had passed, but dawn was still hours away. And I had a feeling tomorrow night would be worse. By the time I locked the pharmacy doors at 6:03 a.m., the world outside felt foreign. The rising sun, dusted stone tree and pale orange, throwing long shadows across silent streets. The snowfall had stopped sometime after 3 a.m., leaving the world blanketed and clean, too clean. No one would guess what had happened inside Tucker's pharmacy just hours earlier. I hadn't slept. I didn't even try. I sat in my truck until the sky turned blue, watching the pharmacy windows in the rearview mirror like a man waiting for them to blink. When I finally walked through Franklin Tucker's front door just after 9 a.m., he didn't even look surprised to see me. He was seated at his kitchen table in a faded green flannel, an old revolver lying beside a half-finished cup of black coffee. A morning newspaper yesterday's, I noticed, sat unopened. You saw something, he said without looking up. You could say that, I replied. He gestured toward the other chair. Sit, I'll explain. Franklin's house was a time capsule of late-century Americana. Worn linoleum floors, a rotary phone mounted on the wall, and wood paneling that hadn't seen a paintbrush since Nixon was president. The kitchen smelled like burned toast and cedar. Start from the beginning, he said. So I did. The crash, the rules, the reflection that didn't move, the faceless pharmacist, the voice on the phone, Clara Tucker. When I got to her name, Franklin flinched like I'd struck him. You're sure she said her name? She told me to tell you hello. He nodded slowly, eyes distant. My grandmother died in 1981. Heart failure. She was the last real Stillwater pharmacist in our line. Not just medicine ritual. Ritual, I raised an eyebrow. She wasn't just filling prescriptions, Franklin said. She was holding the line. I frowned. The line. He pushed back his chair and stood up, walking toward a narrow hallway at the back of the house. Come with me. Behind a bookshelf in a guest bedroom, he revealed a narrow staircase that led down into a stone-walled cellar. It wasn't big, maybe 10 by 10 feet, but the walls were lined with jars, dried herbs, bundles of white sage, and vials of minerals. A large leather-bound book sat on a wooden table beneath a single hanging bulb. Franklin opened it reverently. On the first page was a name written in flowing script, Clara Tucker, RPH. The Stillwater Compendium, he said, passed down through the generations. Each pharmacist adds to it. Formulas, rituals, counteragents, incantations, recipes, and warnings. He flipped through page after page of delicate yellowing paper formulas, written in a combination of Latin and English, some with anatomical drawings, others with sigils burned into the parchment edges. He stopped on one titled Compound 37, the Veil Binder. Underneath, handwritten in a neat, tight scrawl, for stabilization of boundary weak points, apply to all anchor sites. Activation requires Bridgewalker's blood freely given. I stared at him. What's a Bridgewalker? He didn't answer right away. Then it's someone who's died and come back, fully intact, body, mind, soul. My stomach turned. The crash. He nodded. Your medical records say your heart stopped for 3 minutes in the ambulance. I sank into the nearest chair. So that's why Cross wants me. Exactly. Franklin sat across from me. He's not just harvesting dead tissue. He's trying to breach the veil entirely to create a way to pass between the worlds at will. I flipped the page. So what's the formula do? It resets the seals. Each rule corresponds to an anchor point, physical places in the pharmacy that tie to this fund. The rules aren't just survival tactics, they're holding the barrier in place. My eyes caught a side note in Clara's handwriting. The rules are sacred. Speak them aloud and they awaken the sigils. I looked up. So when I say the rules out loud, it's like triggering a defense mechanism. Franklin nodded. That's why it froze when you answered the phone. It wasn't just ritual, it was resistance. Then why not teach everyone this? Because most people wouldn't believe it, he said flatly. And those who do, they'd try to use it. We spent the rest of the day gathering what we needed. Powdered silver nitrate dried veil lily, a flower I'd only ever seen in herbalist forums, elkhorn, shavings, and sage ash. Most of it Franklin had already. His family had been preparing for this for years. But one ingredient was missing: my blood. That night, just after the pharmacy closed, we returned. The building was quiet, no sounds, no footsteps, just the low buzz of the heating vents and the hum of fluorescent light. In the compounding room, Franklin handed me a sterile lancet. 7 drops, he said. I pricked my fingertip and let them fall one by one into the glass vial containing the other ingredients. The liquid inside shimmered, turned violet, then pale blue. It gave off the faint scent of ozone and something floral. We stored it in the fridge for the time being. We weren't ready yet. The anchor points still needed to be identified. And more importantly, Cross was still out there. At 12:57 a.m., the phone rang. Not the usual time. Not 2:13. This wasn't routine. I picked up. Hello? Michael said, Clara's voice. Stronger now. More present. I've seen the ritual, I said. We have the formula. Good. He's coming for you tonight. I gripped the phone harder. Why me? Why now? You've already stepped between worlds. You've returned whole. That makes you valuable to both sides. A beat. Then there's something else you need to understand. The pharmacy is built on a crossing point. That's why the rules work here. Like a fault line. Yes. And Cross has weakened it. Every time you broke a rule, even once he gained ground. I thought about Rule 1, saying Agnes's name, and the way things escalated after that. How do we stop him? You don't, Clara said softly. You seal him in. She gave me one more piece of information, the final key. Each anchor point had a corresponding sigil, etched somewhere into the walls, floors, or fixtures of the pharmacy, carved by her own hand decades ago. They would glow when the formula was applied during the incantation. There are 7, she said, and they must all be lit before sunrise. The line went dead. Outside, snow had started to fall again. Inside, I opened the bottle of the finished compound and watched the faint shimmer swirl inside. Cross wasn't trying to enter. He was already here, waiting, watching. And if we failed, he wouldn't just control Stone Tree. He'd tear a hole big enough for everything on the other side to come through. The 5th night was colder than the rest. By 10:17 p.m., the temperature outside had dropped to 4 Gurnim, and falling the wind slicing through the cracks in the pharmacy windows like ice picks. Stone Tree felt abandoned. The streets were empty, not even the usual stray cat nosing around the dumpster out back. Inside, the warmth of the pharmacy did little to ease the cold crawling down my spine. Franklin had gone home after helping me mark the first 2 anchor points. One behind the register under the tile with a faded copper nail in the center, the other on the far wall of the compounding area behind a false panel we found by accident. Each bore a carved sigil, ancient spiraled symbols I could barely understand. We'd labeled them north and west. We still had 5 to go. I was restocking antihistamines when the printer came alive. No keyboard command. No refill submitted. Just the whir of gears, the squeal of rollers feeding label paper through the machine on its own. Rule 2. My heart skipped. I rushed to the counter, prepared to grab and destroy it without reading. But this time the label fed out differently, not face down. It printed upright as if it wanted me to see. I stared at the name on it. Emily Ruiz. I stopped breathing. My hand hovered above the label, but I couldn't touch it. Couldn't move. Below her name, the prescription, Compound X17, 2 vials. Below that, the signature, Dr. Leonard Cross. The temperature in the room dropped sharply. My breath fogged the glass countertop. Behind me, the drive-through window intercom crackled to life. Michael, a voice whispered, "We're here for your pain." I turned slowly. There was no car, just the dark snow-swirled lot outside. Then came the knock. 3 gentle taps against the glass. Knock, knock, knock. I inched toward the window, keeping the counter between us. I didn't look directly at the glass Rule 6, but enough to see the edge of a pale hand resting against it. And then I heard the voice again. "Michael, it's me." I froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was Emily. My legs went weak, my mouth went dry. She sounded just like she had during her last shift the night of the crash, right before she joked about giving the old Vicodin bottles names like pets. "Please," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "It hurts. You know how it feels. The pain, the drowning. I never got out." My fingers gripped the edge of the counter hard enough to ache. The label still sat behind me on the printer, glowing faintly like it was heating up. I forced myself to speak. "Emily, I saw you die." A pause. Then, "No, Michael. You let me die." Something slammed against the drive-through window. Not a knock this time. A bang, loud, angry enough to rattle the glass. I turned, finally risking a glance. Outside the window stood a figure in a stained pharmacist's coat, face hidden in shadow. The reflection of the interior fluorescence obscuring their features. But I knew the outline. I'd seen it in a photo on Franklin's wall earlier that day. Dr. Leonard Cross. And standing next to him was Emily. She was pale, lips blue, eyes distant. Her posture was all wrong, like a marionette held up by strings. In her hand was a prescription bag. I backed away. My feet slid on the tile. I grabbed the silver key Franklin had given me the night before, set it open the bottom drawer of the old filing cabinet in the office. "Time to find out if your family kept their promises," I whispered. I ran. Down the back hallway, past the locked storeroom, through the office door. Inside the cabinet, the key turned with a heavy click. The drawer opened to reveal a long velvet-lined case with a brass clasp. Inside was a revolver. 6 chambers, carved mother-of-pearl handle. Each bullet inscribed with tiny etchings I couldn't read. Alongside it lay a folded note in faded ink. "For breaches of the 7th kind, use only in direct confrontation. Aim center mass." I loaded it with shaking hands, tucked it into my waistband, and ran back toward the front. The printer had started again. This time multiple labels. Dozens, feeding out in a stream curling like a paper snake across the counter. Each one had the same signature, Dr. Leonard Cross. The lights flickered. A new voice whispered through the intercom, "You could have saved her. You can still fix it. 1 dose, just 1 dose." I pulled the entire stream of paper from the printer and tossed it into the burn bin. Then I struck a match from the emergency drawer, dropped it in. The flames rose fast, the paper catching like dry kindling. Smoke filled the room, acrid and sharp. The fire alarm didn't go off. The sprinkler system didn't activate. Sabotaged. Through the growing smoke, I saw the front door jiggle, then open. They entered as one. 3 figures. The first was an old man, tall, bent slightly, with a cane, eyes dull and lifeless. The second, a woman in a postal uniform, her name tag spinning loosely from her breast pocket. The third, a boy in a varsity jacket from Stone Tree High, his face blank. I recognized them all. Customers, locals, regulars. But they weren't them. Their bodies moved in perfect sync, step for step. Their eyes glowed faintly in the fluorescent haze. And they all spoke at once. "Dr. Cross is ready for your sample now." I backed toward the hallway, revolver drawn. "Stay back." Their synchronized steps didn't stop. The boy twitched unnaturally as he advanced, his fingers curling like claws. Then I remembered something Clara had said: each rule broken weakens the boundary, but each one followed strengthens it. I had destroyed the labels. I hadn't spoken to them by name. I was following the rules again. So I drew a deep breath, and I began to recite. Rule 1, never address customers by name unless they say it first. A ripple passed through the air. The 3 figures staggered slightly. Rule 2, If the prescription label printer runs without being prompted, destroy whatever comes out without reading it. The lights flickered. The walls groaned. They advanced again more erratically now, as if something inside them resisted. Rule 3. I began just as the pharmacy phone rang. 2:13 a.m. exactly. I answered, said nothing. A voice came through. You're doing well, Michael. The next part will be harder, but the light is with you. Clara, say the rest, she urged. Say them all. You'll feel the veil shift. So I did. One by one, each rule spoken like a spell, each one making the building tremble slightly. By the time I finished the 7th rule, the 3 figures were on their knees groaning, their faces starting to melt, not with heat, but like clay underwater. The walls of the pharmacy pulsed with light. The sigils Franklin and I had uncovered earlier began to glow soft blue, then brighter. Only 5 more to find, 5 more seals to activate. And then we could end this. The 5 remaining seals weren't hidden above ground. They were below. After the last 3 intruders collapsed in the pharmacy aisle groaning, their skin liquefying like wax, Franklin burst through the side entrance, shotgun in hand, breath fogging in the frigid air. You said the rules, he asked. All 7, I said, voice hoarse. He nodded grimly. Then the clock just reset. But Cross will try again, harder, smarter. He won't stop until every seal is broken, or he's sealed in. That's when I told him what Clara had said, that the rest of the anchor points were underground, where the original Stillwater pharmacist carved them long before the hardware store ever became a pharmacy. Franklin went pale. That means going through the basement, he muttered. I figured, I said. And it's after midnight. He looked at the basement door like it might bite. Rule 5. I know, I replied. But Clara said rules protect survival, not salvation. If we want to seal him in, we have to break one. We unlocked the basement door at 2:41 a.m. The smell hit first. Old wood, wet stone, mold, and something sharp underneath it all, like rusted iron and spoiled medicine. The air was colder than it should have been, easily 10 or 15 degrees below the rest of the pharmacy. My breath misted in front of me, and Franklin's flashlight beam cut through swirls of dust and something thicker. There were stairs, steep, narrow, unfinished. They descended into darkness like they'd been built before electricity was even a thought. Watch your step, Franklin said. Last time I was down here was in 1985. We never went beyond the cold room. What's in the cold room? I asked. He didn't answer. The descent took minutes but felt like hours. The flashlight caught fragments of things I didn't want to see, handprints in the dust, deep gouges in the stone walls, the remains of shelves packed with rotting prescription bottles, labeled in handwriting I didn't recognize. The cold room was at the bottom, a walk-in freezer from the original hardware store, days now rusted and mostly empty. But in the far wall behind what looked like a row of expired insulin containers was a seam, not a door. A seam, like the wall wasn't real. Clara told me, I whispered, push through. Franklin looked doubtful, like, walk through it. I dropped my shoulder and pressed. The wall gave way like stretched vinyl, cold and rubbery. I stumbled through, and the world changed. The hallway on the other side wasn't made of concrete or brick. It looked carved, natural stone, uneven and ancient. The air was heavier here, the light tinted faintly blue from bioluminescent fungus growing in streaks along the walls. This isn't part of the building, I said. Franklin stepped in behind me, eyes wide. It's not part of any map I've ever seen. The tunnel sloped downward, curving to the left. We walked in silence for what felt like 10 minutes, guided only by the glowing walls. The deeper we went, the more the air buzzed like the pressure before a storm. Finally, the path opened into a chamber. Rough stone floor, tall ceiling, and in the center a pit. 15 feet across, lined with rusted gurneys. Each gurney held a body, some fresh, some rotted, all hooked to IV lines that ran into the pit like feeding tubes. The liquid inside those lines wasn't red. It was silver. A figure stepped into view. A woman in her 30s wearing a faded lab coat, eyes sunken, skin-pale lips cracked and bruised. I used to be like you, she said softly. A pharmacist. Trained, certified, ethical. I raised the revolver. She didn't flinch. Dr. Cross saved me, or what was left. Franklin stepped beside me. Sarah Bryant, you were reported missing in 1998. I wasn't missing, she said. I was remade. Behind her, another figure appeared. This one walked like a man, but the air around him bent. He wore a white coat stained at the cuffs. His face was sunken, eyes too large for his skull, lips thin and stretched unnaturally across long, perfect teeth. Daniel Graves, he said. I froze. That's not my name. He smiled. Not anymore. Leonard Cross stepped forward, arms open like a preacher, greeting a wayward soul. You've returned across the veil, he said. Fully, without fragmentation. Do you understand what that means? I didn't answer. It means you are the formula, he whispered. The missing compound, the bridge between this world and the next. I kept the revolver raised. You're done. We're sealing this place. Tonight. Cross shook his head. You're too late. This chamber feeds on the dead. But you feed it meaning. Your survival has energized the cycle. Every breath you take here keeps this system alive. Franklin stepped forward. That's why the rules started breaking down. You've been drawing power every time a line is crossed. Yes, Cross hissed. And soon I won't need rules at all. The veil will stay open. He raised a hand. The bodies on the gurneys sat up. Their eyes glowed silver, tubes pulsing. I fired the revolver. The first round struck the gurney nearest Cross, exploding in a flash of silver dust. The IV line burned away instantly. One of the corpses screamed a high-pitched, inhuman shriek and collapsed in a pile of ash. I turned to Franklin. The bullets are working. Then don't stop, he shouted. I fired again and again. Each shot loosed silver dust into the air. Wherever it touched, the undead shriveled, rotted, and fell. But the pit pulsed brighter. And Cross just laughed. You're feeding it, Bridgewalker. Don't you see pain, conflict, defiance? It all fuels the loop. I stopped firing, looked down. Beside my boot was a vial of Compound 37, the formula we'd prepared upstairs. I grabbed it, held it to the pit. The liquid inside trembled, then glowed. Franklin, I said, the seals are here, in this chamber. We turned, scanning the walls, and there they were, 7 symbols carved into the stone, faintly glowing but dim, waiting. I raised the vial, ran to the nearest one, and splashed a drop. The symbol ignited, flaring blue. We split up. Seal after seal, we anointed each with drops of the formula. 5 lit, then 6. The 7th, closest to Cross, remained dark. He stepped in front of it. You don't know what you're doing, he hissed. I can show you how to live forever. How to end death. How to be whole. I already am, I said, because I came back with my soul. And I threw the last of the compound into his face. He screamed, smoke rising from his skin, and staggered backward into the final symbol. Franklin darted past him, splashing the last drop. The final seal flared. The entire chamber shook. From the pit, a howl rose. Something ancient, starving. The IV line snapped. The bodies on the gurneys ignited in silver flame. The fungus on the walls turned black and died. Cross fell to his knees, hands clawing at the stone. You don't understand, he gasped. You've severed the bridge. You've damned us all. No, I said. We just closed the door. And then the floor gave way. We scrambled back up the tunnel, smoke and collapsing stone at our heels. The deeper chamber fell into itself behind us, screams echoing from below like a hell collapsing in real time. At the freezer wall, we turned. The passage behind us was gone. Just solid concrete. No sum, no portal. No more Cross. By the time we reached the top of the basement stairs, the pharmacy floor was shaking. The seals had held. The ritual chamber had collapsed. But Cross, he hadn't died. He'd escaped upward. The wooden door slammed behind us with a thunderous bang. I threw the bolt, but we both knew it was useless. That door had once held in bad insulation and rats. It wouldn't stop something that had spent decades harvesting the dead. Franklin leaned against the wall, breath ragged. We bought time, not victory. I nodded. The seals underground were only part of it. The rest up here. He pulled the Stillwater compendium from his coat, flipping frantically until he reached the page Claire had annotated. 7 anchors, 4 directions. 1 below, 1 above, 1 central. The seals must flare as one to bind the breach. We'd sealed the below. But 5 remain. North wall, south wall, east wall, west wall, center point beneath the pharmacy counter. Roof access. The basement now sealed. We had hours, maybe minutes, to activate the remaining 6. And the sun was starting to rise. The first tremor hit at 4:14 a.m. Shelves toppled. The printer sparked. Bottles of codeine clattered across the tile floor. And then the power cut out. Darkness swallowed the pharmacy. The emergency lights kicked on a second later, casting a red glow like a submarine under siege. The drive-through window shattered. I didn't have to look to know something had entered. We moved fast. I grabbed the vial of Compound 7 from the fridge. It had survived the descent, and we made our way to the first known seal, the north wall just behind the vitamin display. It took effort to move the heavy shelf, but we found the sigil carved faintly into the tile, glowing faint blue in the red emergency light. I poured a drop of the compound. The sigil flared, bathing the entire section of the pharmacy in brilliant azure light. The wall stopped vibrating. The tremors paused. But then came a voice from the front door. Michael. A woman's voice. Too familiar. Emily's voice. I turned. The entrance was open. She stood just beyond the threshold, barefoot in the snow, wearing the same uniform she wore the night of the crash. Michael, she repeated, you left me behind. Why? Franklin grabbed my shoulder. Don't speak. Not to her. I know, I whispered. Rule 1. But it wasn't just Emily. Others were gathering behind her. Locals, some dead for years, some we'd seen walking the aisles just days ago. all wearing human skin like clothes they barely fit into. Puppets. They stepped forward. Franklin raised the shotgun. We need to finish the seals, now. East wall. Inside the employee break room behind the locker panel. We pried it open with a crowbar. The sigil lit instantly when the compound touched it. The surrounding wall seemed to breathe and stilled. The intruders hadn't entered yet, not fully, but they were inside the building. I could feel their footsteps through the floor. South wall, just behind the drive-through mechanism. Half the wall was gone glass scattered across the linoleum like fallen stars. The sigil was nearly obscured but still intact. The moment the blue light activated, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The creatures paused, twitching. Their bodies didn't like the light. Two more, Franklin said. Center and roof. The center seal was beneath the register. We moved the counter, prying open a floor panel Franklin's father had once said was structural. Underneath, carved directly into the cement, was the central sigil, larger, more intricate. I poured the last of the vial. The compound hissed as it touched the symbol. The floor glowed under our feet. The building stabilized, but the creatures didn't flee. Instead, they screamed, a unified, guttural, deafening noise that sent pain slicing through my skull. Then came footsteps on the roof. They're trying to get to the final anchor, Franklin said. The roof access, I answered. Top seal. We sprinted to the back stairwell. Franklin climbed ahead, shotgun ready. We reached the roof at 5:07 a.m., just as the first hints of dawn lit the eastern horizon. The air was bitter cold wind howling across the flat surface. And standing at the far end was Cross, what was left of him. His body shimmered in the half-light, barely holding shape. Parts of him flickered like bad reception, his arm dissolving, reforming, blinking out. His face was stretched tight over an unnatural skull. But his voice was clear. You've done well, he said, but it's not enough. Franklin raised the shotgun, back away from the anchor. I am the anchor now, Cross said. The ritual chamber failed, but I fed, I changed, and when the sun rises, I'll be everywhere. He raised his arms. Behind him, a portal opened. Darkness, darker than space, a wound in the sky. Inside, shapes moved, things with teeth, faces without eyes, hands that bent the wrong way. They're waiting, Cross said. I built them a door. You opened it. Franklin fired. The silver-etched slug hit Cross square in the chest. He staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, he laughed. Silver is for the dead. I've become something more. He surged forward. I reached the roof's center. There, carved into a steel maintenance hatch, was the final sigil. I raised the emergency backup vial Franklin had stashed in the tool chest and poured it over the mark. The sigil flared brighter than all the others. A column of blue light shot upward into the sky, piercing the portal. Cross screamed, clawing at the air, his form unraveling. The creatures inside the breach screeched, their limbs, retracting faces, dissolving as the light burned through them. The portal buckled, cracked, and imploded. Cross reached for me one last time. You could have changed everything, he gasped. I did, I said. I stopped you. And then his shattered body torn apart by the converging seals. Gone. The blue light receded. The wind died. The town was still. The sky over Stone Tree was clear by 6:13 a.m. No sign remained of the portal that had opened on the rooftop minutes earlier. No tear in the fabric of the world, no ash of the creatures that tried to slip through. The only proof that anything had happened at all was the faint blue glow still radiating from the 7 anchor points, now slowly fading into invisibility, like chalk washed from old stone. I stood at the edge of the roof, Franklin beside me, both of us soaked in sweat despite the 20-degree-off wind. His hands trembled as he reloaded the revolver out of habit. But there was no more shooting to do. It was over. We'd sealed the breach. We'd survived. And Cross was gone. At least the part of him that could walk this world. Back inside the pharmacy, the lights flickered back on. First the fluorescence, then the backup systems. The central heater groaned back to life, heat breathing through the vents again. We made our way down to the main floor, careful to avoid the shattered remains of the drive-through window. Broken glass, scorched floor tiles. The faint outline of one of the puppets, a teenage boy in a Stone Tree high jacket, who had melted like wax near the vitamin aisle after the 6th seal activated. Outside, the first hint of sunrise colored the snow gold. Quiet fell over Main Street. I didn't realize how long I'd been holding my breath until I finally let it out. You okay? Franklin asked, voice rasping. No, I admitted. But I'm alive. He nodded. Then you're doing better than most. We stood there in the stillness of the pharmacy, the place that had almost become a gate to the other side, surrounded by the bones of rituals, rules, and old blood. And then the phone rang. 2:13 a.m. like always. Except now it was 6:21 a.m. Franklin looked at me, frowning. That shouldn't be ringing. I answered. Silence. Then Clara's voice, warm and clear as morning dew. You did well, Michael. I swallowed. Is it really over? For now, she said. Cross is gone. His pattern broken. But the boundary, It's never permanent. The seals fade, the veil thins, time weakens everything. What about the rules? They remain, Clara said, so long as someone watches them. That's the cost of a town built on hollow earth. I looked around the pharmacy, the seven seals now invisible again. I could feel them warm pulses under the tile, like breathing through stone. And what about me? You're the bridge walker, Clara said gently. You crossed, you returned, you've been claimed by both sides. That makes you dangerous, but also vital. I leaned on the counter, then what happens now? You stay, Clara said. You protect the seals. You become what Cross failed to be, the watcher of the boundary. Clara's voice faded. Exactly. Click. The line went dead. 6 months later, life in Stone Tree returned to what the townspeople considered normal. No one remembered the puppets. No one remembered the way the ground shook or the inhuman howls in the snow. Franklin and I gave them a story, a gas leak, a heater malfunction, an electrical surge that fried the security system. Most believed it. The ones who didn't simply stopped asking. Denial is one hell of a survival mechanism. The pharmacy underwent what we called a renovation. In reality, we reinforced the 7 anchor points, inlaid the sigils into the new flooring, carved them into ceiling beams, blended them into the tile. Most customers never noticed, but they're there. Always watching, always ready. Franklin stepped down after that night. He still helps with compound preparation and watches the south seal when I'm off duty. But the night shift, that belongs to me now. Michael Graves, night pharmacist, watcher of the boundary. The rules remain pinned to the wall behind the register. Every new page I print includes them. The staff call it superstition. I don't argue. I still get calls at 2:13 a.m. every now and then, Clara's voice giving updates from the other side. Her presence keeps the air calm somehow, as if someone's watching me while I watch the door. Sometimes the prescription printer tries to start by itself. I unplug it. Sometimes the drive-through intercom crackles. I ignore it. Sometimes I see a flicker of a white lab coat in the convex security mirror, familiar, faceless and watching. But the seals hold, because I follow the rules. There's one more thing. 3 weeks ago, a woman came in at exactly 2:12 a.m. She wore a winter coat and snow boots. Her hands trembled. She didn't say her name. I served her anyway without asking. She left a prescription slip behind unsigned, but the name on it made my stomach knot. Emily Ruiz. I never processed it, never looked up what it asked for. I burned it in the compounding room sink and whispered every rule aloud as the paper turned to ash. Some part of her is still trying to get through, or maybe something is just wearing her voice. Either way, I'm not letting it back in. Tonight, the snow's falling again, just like that first night. I'm watching the doors, the mirrors, the phones, the printer. Everything is quiet. But I know better now. Quiet is not safety. Quiet is waiting. Because the boundary is real, and someone has to watch it. So I do, night after night, rule after rule, drop by drop, until someone else takes the shift.